I cannot remember a period when there was this much interest in the Beatles. So, I've been listening to all these years, as I said, we're 31 hours into listening, and they've only just become the Beatles because Ringo's only just joined. Sam Mendes is doing those biopics. Peter Jackson did all the Let It Be sessions, and then the rooftop concert, which was remastered to be shown in cinemas. I had that fleeting cameo as a skiffle band in the Brian Epstein biopic Midas. I mean, there is everywhere you look, there is Beatles stuff. So now, new documentary from Kevin MacDonald, who, of course, you've interviewed, made One Day in September, Touching the Void, Marley, Whitney, and Sam Rice Edwards. So this is a documentary. It's called One to One, John and Yoko, and it follows the period of John Lennon and Yoko Ono living in a loft apartment in Greenwich Village in the early 70s, around 71 for a couple of years, being involved with each other, with television, with Jerry Rubin, and with idealistic politics. Here is a little clip from One to One.
Okay, shall we start?
Yeah. Okay, so John...
Yoko, take your legs out of bed so you don't look like you're in bed. The main thing that Yoko and I are doing, and Jerry and all the people we're involved with, is to change the apathy that all the youth have. We must get them excited about what we can do again, and that's why we're going to go on the road, speak to them, sing to them, and do anything to get them alive again. And that's our job, and that will, from America, it will spread to the rest of the world. Vive la revolution.
You see, one thing for me, I find it hard to hear that and not hear Ruttles, because it's the plumbing. We're talking about the plumbing of anyway. So the title for this doc comes from the benefit concerts that John and Yoko ended up putting on for the children of the Willowbrook Institution, from which that concert, this has got remastered audio and footage. And it was the remastered stuff that was first brought to Kevin MacDonald. And he said, okay, well, this is interesting. What I want to do is expand the project and sort of see how this came about. What were the events that led up to it? Because it was, Lennon doing a concert after the Beatles, the only one. And so the fans will know that concert had previously spawned the Live in New York City album from '86. There was an accompanying video for that. Sean Ono Lennon oversaw the remastering of the audio for the film, which, like so many rock picks now, like Becoming Led Zeppelin, and in fact, like Moon Age Daydreams, being released in IMAX, because this has become a very big thing for IMAX, is footage of, great rock and roll acts. I went to see Dance Craze in IMAX. That was shot on 35 horizontally so that it could be, blown up for 70mm IMAX. So the concert footage is fine. And it's the audio is remastered and everything. What is much more intriguing is the story around it. So it's the early 70s. John and Yoko, convinced that they were being bugged, started recording their phone calls. And this, in a very sort of Nixonian way, provides this extraordinary archive that Kevin MacDonald has called the beating heart of his film, these recordings of phone conversations. And the recordings, I mean, they're incredibly candid. There's an ongoing attempt all the way through the documentary of Yoko Ono to procure some flies for an art exhibition that she's doing. And there's a whole thing about how can we get the flies and how much will they cost and where can we get them from and will they be alive and blah, blah, blah. Then we hear Yoko Ono discussing what it was like for her in the wake up of the Beatles breaking up and her being blamed for it and vilified. There's all this stuff about their attempts to do they were going to do a bail tour. At one point they had this idea that they were going to do a tour, and wherever they went they were going to get people out of jail on bail, and that was what the concert was going to do. And then there's this sort of long saga of this guy that they knew who was going through Bob Dylan's bins and accusing him of being a fake folk artist because he was a millionaire, and they're trying to get him to leave him alone because they want him to be involved. I mean, it's all this kind of weird internecine stuff. As a backdrop to all of this, you have the politics of that era, which of course is Vietnam, Nixon, Attica, the shooting of George Wallace, and John and Yoko's kind of often quite haphazard engagement in politics. this weird thing that, like Elvis, they loved nothing more than watching TV. In fact, the whole the Willowbrook thing happened because they'd seen a piece about it on the television and thought, well, that's what we ought to be doing. And then you get Allen Ginsberg and Jerry Rubin, and so there's poetry and there's politics, and there's them sitting around in the bedroom watching television. And then there's another story about the fact that Yoko is trying to be reconnected with her child. So all these things are going on, and they all lead in a very kind of chaotic pinball way to the concert, which finally happens. But in order to tell this story, one of the things the filmmakers did was they rebuilt the apartment that they lived in. They kind of constructed it, and the camera sort of prowls around this very detailed reconstruction of the area in which John and Yoko were living, watching television, taking their phone calls, receiving this stuff. And it sounds like it shouldn't work. It sounds like that's just a kind of a slightly preposterous device, but weirdly enough, it does. And I thought this was really enjoyable. I thought this was really interesting because it's a sort of depiction, because obviously there's so much about the Beatles. But the period afterwards, the aftermath, them going to New York, the fact that they were trying to deport them from New York, and they were trying to take root there, but they were in risk of being thrown out. I find that whole period fascinating, and as is so often the case with these Kevin MacDonald documentaries, he really gets into stuff that even if you vaguely knew about it, you didn't really know about it, and it's kind of like spending time with people when they're really they're, on the one hand they're really, really engaged, on the other hand they're kind of fantastically naive, and the sort of the way in which they're engaging with politics, you heard in that thing, it's just like, yes, well, wherever we go, I'm not going to do the accent, wherever we go, we've got to get over the apathy, we're going to sort all the apathy and do the thing. And as I said, that always reminds me of the Ruttles. But I really enjoyed this, and believe me, I have seen and listened to so much Beatles stuff recently. I did sit and exactly the same thought as you had. Couldn't there possibly be anything new? And the answer is yes, there is. This is a very, very, very engaging portrait of two people in a strange time in their life, desperately trying to be engaged with the world, and often in a really, really sort of just haphazard manner, but in a way that you actually feel that you do get to know something about them. So I liked it very much.